The four-speed manual transmission built the muscle car era. Then insurance companies killed it. Then manufacturers brought it back. Then technology killed it again. This is the story of how 3 pedals and a stick shift defined performance driving for 50 years, and why you'll probably never row your own gears in a new car again. In 1963, if you wanted a performance car, you had exactly 2 transmission choices, and both of them were terrible. You could get a 3-speed manual that felt like stirring concrete and couldn't handle more than 300 horsepower without grenading itself. Or you could get an automatic transmission, which meant you were either old, lazy, or didn't understand what driving was supposed to feel like. Real performance drivers were stuck with inadequate options, and Detroit knew it. The problem with 3-speed manuals wasn't just that they had one less gear. The gear spacing was all wrong for performance driving. First gear got you moving, second gear got you to maybe 40 miles per hour, and third gear was supposed to cover everything from 50 to 120. You had this massive gap between second and third where the engine would fall out of its power band, and by the time you hit third gear, you'd already lost the race. Automatics were even worse. The Power Glide, the Fordomatic, the Torque Flight. They were designed for smooth cruising and easy driving, not for putting power to the ground. They slipped, they were heavy, and they robbed anywhere from 30 to 50 horsepower just from parasitic losses in the torque converter. Worse, you couldn't control when they shifted. The car decided for you, which meant you were always in the wrong gear at the wrong time. Performance drivers needed something better. They needed closer gear ratios, stronger components, and most importantly, complete control over when the car shifted. What they needed was a 4-speed manual transmission that could actually survive behind a big block V8. Borg-Warner delivered that solution in 1957 with the T10 4-speed. It wasn't the first 4-speed transmission ever built, but it was the first one designed specifically for American performance cars. The T10 could handle 350 horsepower, had reasonable gear spacing, and most importantly, it was tough enough to survive actual abuse. Chevrolet dropped it behind the fuel-injected Corvette engine, and suddenly, performance driving got a whole lot more interesting. But the T10 was just the beginning. By 1963, General Motors was developing the Muncie 4-speed specifically for the coming muscle car wars. The Muncie M20 was the wide ratio box for street driving, smooth and easy to shift. The M21 was the close ratio version for serious performance, with gear spacing designed specifically for drag racing. And then, there was the M22 Rock Crusher, the transmission that sounded like a bucket of bolts tumbling down a stairwell and could handle anything short of a nuclear explosion. The Rock Crusher got its name from the straight-cut gears that made it nearly indestructible. Regular transmissions used helical gears that were quiet but generated side-loading forces that could break the case under high power. The M22 used straight-cut gears that whined like a top fuel dragster but transferred power straight through the transmission without any side loads. You could drop the clutch at 6,000 RPM behind a 450 horsepower 427, and the Rock Crusher would just ask for more. By 1964, when the GTO dropped and created the muscle car segment, the 4-speed manual wasn't just an option. It was the badge of honor that separated real performance cars from pretenders. You could order your GTO with a 2-speed automatic, but everybody knew you didn't really want to go fast. The 3-speed manual was for people who couldn't afford the good transmission. But if you checked the box for the 4-speed, you were serious. And it wasn't just about the transmission itself. It was about what came with it. That Hurst shifter rising up from the console, positioned perfectly so you could slap it into gear without taking your eyes off the road. The clutch pedal that required actual leg strength to push down. The satisfaction of timing your shifts perfectly and feeling the car surge forward as you grabbed the next gear. This wasn't just driving. It was skill. It was involvement. It was proof that you understood what performance meant. The marketing reflected this. Every single muscle car advertisement from 1964 to 1970 featured the 4-speed prominently. 4 on the floor became the phrase that defined performance. Pontiac ads showed the Hurst shifter. Chevrolet bragged about the Rock Crusher. Mopar pushed their A833 4-speed as the only transmission tough enough to handle a Hemi. The 4-speed manual became so synonymous with performance that manufacturers started putting fake shifter boots in automatic cars just to make them look faster. The peak years were 1968 to 1970. During that time, you literally could not sell a serious muscle car without offering a 4-speed. The Chevelle SS, the Roadrunner, the Boss 429 Mustang, the Hemi Cuda, every single one of them came standard with a 4-speed manual because that's what performance drivers demanded. Automatic transmissions were getting better, but they still couldn't match the engagement and control of rowing your own gears. Drag racers proved this every weekend. The fastest street cars were all running 4 speeds because you could drop the clutch at peak power and launch harder than any torque converter could manage. The best drivers could shift a rock crusher faster than any automatic could swap gears. Money shifts happened when you grabbed second instead of fourth and sent your tachometer into the stratosphere. But that just proved you were trying hard enough. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Insurance companies were tracking accident statistics, and they noticed something interesting. 4-speed manual cars were crashing at significantly higher rates than automatics. The reason was obvious. It's a lot easier to lose control of a car when you're busy shifting gears and working a clutch pedal. Insurance companies started charging premium rates specifically for 4-speed manuals. By 1970, the insurance on a 4-speed GTO was running 30 to 40% higher than the same car with an automatic. Then the government stepped in with emissions regulations that fundamentally changed the calculation. The Clean Air Act of 1970 required consistent emissions across all driving conditions, and 4-speed manuals had a problem. They were completely dependent on the driver. An experienced driver could shift at the right RPM and keep emissions reasonable. A teenager learning to drive would lug the engine, over-rev it, and produce emissions that were all over the map. Automatic transmissions, on the other hand, shifted at exactly the same RPM every single time. They were consistent, predictable, and easy to tune for emissions compliance. Manufacturers realized they could meet emissions standards much easier with automatics than with 4-speeds that depended on driver skill. The fuel crisis of 1973 finished the job. When gas prices tripled and you couldn't find premium fuel at any price, fuel economy became more important than performance. Automatic transmissions with torque converter lockup and taller gearing got better fuel economy than 4-speeds that encouraged drivers to wind out the engine. Suddenly, the 4-speed went from being the performance choice to being the gas-wasting choice. By 1975, the 4-speed manual had almost completely disappeared from American performance cars. The muscle car era was over, and the transmissions that built it were casualties of insurance costs, emissions regulations, and fuel economy demands. You could still get a 4-speed in some economy cars and trucks, but performance applications had largely switched to automatics. The 3-pedal experience that defined driving engagement for an entire generation was gone. For 15 years, the 4-speed manual was basically extinct in American performance cars. The Corvette kept offering one because enthusiasts demanded it. But even Corvette buyers were ordering automatics at increasing rates. The Mustang 5.0 had a 4-speed option, but most buyers chose the automatic. The manual transmission became a niche option for hardcore enthusiasts who were willing to sacrifice convenience for engagement. Then something unexpected happened. In the early 1990s, a new generation of drivers started demanding manual transmissions again. These weren't the guys who grew up with muscle cars. These were younger enthusiasts who had learned about driving engagement from European sports cars and Japanese imports. They wanted the involvement, the control, the skill expression that only a manual transmission could provide. Manufacturers responded by developing a new generation of manual transmissions that were stronger, smoother, and had more gears. The Tremec T56 6-speed debuted in 1992 and became the new standard for American performance. It showed up behind the Viper V10, the Corvette LT1, and the Cobra SVT. The T56 could handle 500 horsepower in stock form and gave drivers 6 forward gears with ratios spaced perfectly for both track driving and highway cruising. The six-speed manual created a renaissance. Suddenly, rowing your own gears was cool again. The 1990s and early 2000s saw manual transmissions offered across the entire performance car spectrum. The Mustang GT, the Camaro Z28, the Challenger, the Viper, the Corvette, they all came standard with manual transmissions, and buyers actually chose them. For about 15 years, it looked like the manual transmission had successfully made a comeback. But technology had other plans. Dual-clutch transmissions arrived in the mid-2000s and changed everything. DCTs could shift faster than any human driver. They didn't require clutch pedal skill, and they could be programmed for perfect emissions and fuel economy. Porsche's PDK, Volkswagen's DSG, Ferrari's F1 transmission. They were all faster, more efficient, and easier to drive than manual transmissions. The performance numbers were undeniable. A 2010 Corvette with the automatic transmission was 0.3 of a second faster to 60 miles per hour than the same car with a manual. The quarter-mile times favored the automatic by half a second. Lap times at the track showed the automatic was consistently quicker because it never missed a shift, never upset the chassis with clutch dumps, and kept the engine in the power band perfectly. Manufacturers started making the automatic standard and charging extra for the manual transmission. That was the first warning sign. Then they started limiting which models offered manuals at all. The high-performance versions went automatic only because the manuals couldn't handle the power or couldn't achieve the performance targets. The manual became the base option for people who couldn't afford the good transmission. Then came the final blow: electric vehicles. EVs don't have transmissions at all, just single-speed reduction gears. You can't offer a manual transmission in an electric car because there's nothing to shift. When Tesla proved that electric performance cars could dominate acceleration runs, drag strips, and even track days, the manual transmission's last advantage, driver engagement, started looking less important than raw performance numbers. By 2020, the manual transmission was disappearing fast. Porsche dropped the manual from the 911 Turbo. BMW stopped offering manuals in most M cars. Mercedes went automatic only across their entire AMG lineup. Even Chevrolet made the C8 Corvette automatic only, breaking a tradition that went back to 1953. The three-pedal experience that defined performance driving for 70 years was being systematically eliminated from every new performance car. The few manufacturers still offering manuals treat them like museum pieces. You can get a manual in the Mustang GT, the Camaro SS, and the Challenger if you specifically request it, but the dealers don't stock them and the manufacturers don't promote them. The manual has become the special order option for a dying breed of enthusiasts who value involvement over performance. In 2024, you can count on two hands the number of new performance cars sold in America with manual transmissions. The Mustang, the Camaro, until they discontinued it entirely, the Civic Type R, the BRZ and GR86, the Miata. That's basically the entire list. Everything else is automatic, dual clutch, or electric with no transmission at all. Here's what makes this story tragic. The manual transmission didn't disappear because it was bad technology. It disappeared because it was too good at what it did. Insurance companies killed it because it let drivers access too much performance too easily. Emissions regulations killed it because it gave drivers too much control. Modern automatics killed it by being even faster. And EVs are killing it by making the entire concept obsolete. But for one perfect generation, from 1964 to around 1975, the four-speed manual was the absolute pinnacle of driver involvement. It required skill to operate correctly. It rewarded smoothness and punished mistakes. It connected you to the car in a way that no automatic ever could. You weren't just driving, you were orchestrating power delivery with your left foot, your right hand, and perfect timing. Every muscle car guy in his 50s and 60s remembers exactly what his first four-speed felt like. The weight of the Hurst shifter, the effort required to push in the clutch, the precise timing needed to grab third gear without grinding, the satisfaction of a perfectly matched rev on a downshift. That's not nostalgia, that's genuine connection to the machine that modern cars simply don't offer anymore. The manual transmission taught an entire generation what it meant to actually drive a car instead of just operating one. It separated the skilled drivers from the amateurs. It made you better because you had to pay attention, had to time your shifts, had to understand what the engine was doing. Cars with automatics were faster on paper, but nobody bragged about their automatic transmission. Everybody bragged about their 4-speed. That's the rise and fall of the 4-speed manual, from absolutely essential in 1964 to basically extinct in 2024. Insurance companies couldn't kill it permanently. Emissions regulations couldn't kill it permanently. But the combination of automated manuals that shift faster than humans and electric cars that don't shift at all finally did what nothing else could. The 3-pedal experience is dying. Your kids probably won't learn to drive stick. Your grandkids definitely won't. In 20 years, the idea of manually changing gears while driving will seem as archaic as hand-cranking an engine to start it. The 4-speed manual built the muscle car era, defined what driving engagement meant for 3 generations, and then got killed twice by progress itself. Some legends don't die. They just get made obsolete by technology that's faster but delivers none of the soul.